The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, see everything we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Today we have a classic from Scott Tallman Powers. It's called City Scenes.
Hi, my name's Scott Powers. Thanks for being here with me today. We're going to be doing a demonstration of a city scene, and it's one of my most favorite subjects. And living in a city like Chicago, there's tons of subject matter for me. And I've been living there probably about 15 years now, and I went to school in Chicago also. I went to the American Academy of Art for about 4 years, and that was a life-changing event for me. It was a fantastic school. So my most influential teachers at the Academy were Dr. John Trapp and Ted Smiskevich and Robert Grajecki. And those guys really was a huge influence in my career and my development too. So, but I also spent a lot of time at the Palette and Chisel. I would go there after school almost every day for 4 years and took workshops and did open studios and everything else. And so after I got out of school, I worked as an illustrator for about 4 years. But my main goal was to be a fine artist, to work full-time painting for galleries. And so after 4 years, I had to quit and pursue my dreams, but also worked on the side as an illustrator, making a living as best I could. But it was a struggle, but it was well worth it. And but that's a little bit about myself. But what I want to talk to you about today is about painting a city scene. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you. I'm going to start off by showing you a color study and the photo inspiration. And the color study that I did it from life. I did it out on the street. And it was a little bit rainy day. And I love painting gray rainy days, so some of my favorites. Then after that, we're going to get into a black and white study. And the black and white study helps me solidify my design and strengthen my idea in my head, and kind of solidifies a lot of things for me. So I'm going to show you that process also, and then we're going to go into the large painting after that. If that makes sense. So here, let me first start off by talking about my materials, and I'm going to show you the paints that I use, the brushes, and my knives, and talk a little bit about the canvas I'm going to be using too. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my palette, my colors here. And the palette you see here is just the Richardson palette, just the wood bottom of the palette. And I like seeing I like the patina that it starts to build up after a while. So the colors that I have here are going to be, I'm going to start off with my white. And my white at this location here is a Permalba white. And I also use Utrecht's titanium white, and a number of others, depends on what I'm painting, but I usually kind of bounce between those. And this is more of a smoother white, It's not as stiff. And this one, this is a titanium white from Daniel Smith. It's called Stiff Mixed White, which has a lot of strong body to it. And so I go back and forth between the two to have more of a fluid mixture, and then one that's a little stiffer. So, and I like to split up my cools and my warms and neutrals over here too. So I'm going to actually come down through here to my cools to explain what I have here. This is Winsor Newton Green Gold in this location here. And this one is a Colorium Blue from De La Rowney. And I just like it because it just has a good intensity to it because it's a phthalo base, I believe. Phthalo blue base. And this one right here is a Prussian Blue. And that I use all different varieties. I like Gamblins, and I like Rembrandts also. This ivory black, this is an ivory black here, and this is that I kind of bounce between, you know, either De La Rowney or Utrecht or Holbein. There's a number of different ones I like. So these are my cools. And this little area right here you see, I might have like a tinted white, kind of a titanium buff sometimes. So, but not too often, but I use it every once in a while. And I kind of mix my own occasionally. And I'm going to start off with my, my yellow here. And my yellow is a Permanent Yellow Lemon. And that's from Holbein. And I really like that color. It has some good strength to it, and good tinting strength also. So the next one is a Permanent Yellow Light, which is a little bit warmer than the lemon. This one has a little bit greener tinge to it, leaning more towards the greens. And this is and that's from Holbein also. And this is another Holbein color. This is Permanent Orange. And the next one is a Naphthol Red, and that's from Gamblin. And I kind of got away from my cadmiums for a while because I wanted to kind of somewhat purify my palette a little bit because I play in it so much with my hands, and we'll talk about that later. But the Naphthol has a translucency to it that I like a lot, and whenever it's tinted with white, it doesn't die as much as I feel cadmium red medium does. And the next color we have here is a yellow ochre, and that's a Utrecht color. And a lot of my earth colors, I'll go between Utrecht or De La Rowney or Winsor Newton. I kind of bounce around. Some of them are very specific to certain brands, but the more earth colors, I can go between a number of different ones. And the one right next to it's like my favorite color of all time. This is an Indian Yellow Deep, which is more towards the greener side. And the Indian Yellow is more of an orangier yellow, but it's really transparent, and it's just a great strong color that I really, really like. And this one is from Winsor Newton. And the color next to this is Venetian Red, and that's a really nice color. I like that a lot too. Has a kind of a pinkier tint to it that's a little bit less orange than like a Terra Rosa, but it has a very, very strong color though. And this one is a Winsor Newton also. And the color next to this is a Permanent Rose from Winsor Newton. I like this a lot, and it's good to cross over into your darks, and it has a nice tinting strength also. Going into our neutrals here is in my umbers, it's a raw umber, and this is I use Utrecht and the De La Rowney I like a lot. So and that has more of a greener tinge, more of a greener umber. And the warmer umber is a burnt umber I have here, and that's from the same manufacturers of, you know, Utrecht or De La Rowney or Gamblin. So that's pretty good. And the next one is a transparent red iron oxide, And I was using transparent brown oxide for a number of years, but it was just too similar to the burnt umber and for me. And I just needed to have a little bit more of a push towards the red in here. And it's a great transparent color, and it's great for use in flush tones and everything else. So now we're going to get into my grays I have here. And what you see here is a warm gray that I mix from scratch. I like to mix up a lot of, even some of my palette scrapings I'll turn into a neutral. And I loosely mix it, so I like some striations that you get into the warm gray here. So it kind of has some like little surprises whenever you're mixing into it. I kind of like that. And here is a cool gray mixed from an ivory black and a titanium white. And sometimes I will either mix this or I will buy it already in the tube from Gamblin, the Portland Gray Deep. I really like that a lot. So it's a good cool neutral that I can use. And the next one here is a brown ochre from Sennelier. It's a little oily, but I drain some of the oil out sometimes and work with this. This is a great kind of a grayer yellow ochre. And I see this a lot in a lot of things. But I have to be careful with these things too, that it doesn't take over your palette. And we'll talk about that as we're mixing. But that's pretty much my palette layout here. And this is an area where if I'm standing in front of the palette, I got it off to my left here, so I moved the liquid over here, over to the side. But I usually just kind of drip some liquid right around this little area. Okay. I'm going to talk about my brushes. Okay, now we're going to talk about my tools here. I'm going to talk about the brushes that I like to use and my knives as well, painting and mixing knives. I'm going to start with my soft hairs. I usually have a bunch of soft hairs like these. I like soft hairs a lot with the badgers and the sables. And this particular one is from the Renaissance Company. I think these are somewhat discontinued, but any of the like the Dick Blick or Utrecht's Klinsky sables are great. But I like those because they're economical and I can abuse them and not feel bad about it, because I'm kind of abusive with my brushes. And so, spending $30 on a small little brush, I can't justify that. So, but the worse these things get, the more I like them. And the next ones you have here are the 5590 land nickel brushes. These are great. They fall apart, but they have some great, once they do start falling apart, they have some great textural effects that you can get with them. And this one right next to it right here is more of a filbert. It's like a 5520. And that's from Lane Nickel also. And this is a number 6, I believe. And I like the filbert on here for a number of different reasons. I like them in the use with the portrait and the figure, and they could take a beating. So I like these. The next ones are the silver brushes, or bristle brushes, and I started using flats for a number of years, and then I just went back to filberts because they turned into filberts, anyway. And I started getting away from the mechanical feeling of the application of the paint with the flat brushes. So I'm constantly trying to kind of get rid of that feeling of the brush stroke. So then, with that said, I recently started making my own brushes by taking a trip out to Arizona to visit some friends and paint, and was introduced to this artist, Buck McCain, that showed me this fantastic way of making your brushes. And I was so excited, and I went and made some when I got back home, and took some old brushes apart, some old stain brushes, and kind of epoxied them onto an oak handle. So the handles are probably about 3 inches longer than an average, but they're just a lot of fun to play with and stuff. And you can make some interesting textures and grind them into your canvas and do a number of different things. So I'm probably going to be making a lot more. So next is I'm going to talk here about the knives I use, and this is you know, a regular mixing knife that I can use as painting knife too. I've had this for a number of years. For some reason I break a lot of these things because I'm trying to find the ones that have like a good weld. It's like a smooth weld. It's not a tack weld. So it's all just one piece of metal. It's usually the best ones that don't break. And this is another, oh, and these are, I got these just at Utrecht. I think these are the Utrecht's painting knives. And this particular small one right here is from Holbein. And that works out great for small little areas of painting. And this one has more of a unique edge that I like to it, that I can get into some and do some interesting things with it. So I like to experiment a lot, and sometimes, you know, even make my own painting knives, or something that kind of I can't find in the stores, but can give me more of an interesting effect. And this one also, these right here, this is a softening brush that I have. That they're kind of the cheapies, and they I use these quite a bit also to soften edges and, you know, various things. And I also use the 5590s for softening edges as well. But that's pretty much what my tools are. And then we're going to start getting into the little study. Okay, now I want to show you the photo that was my inspiration. Actually, the scene was my inspiration, but I want to show you the photo that I took while I was on location. And so what I'll show you here. We got a great large flat screen that we're using to display the photo. And what we're going to be doing here is this little corner scene of this sandwich shop in Chicago. And this is down the street from my studio, actually. I'm about you know, less than a mile up the street. But what I want to get across here is how to really simplify your city scene, because there's a lot of chaotic stuff going on in the city, so we need to really simplify. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to actually pick and choose to a certain extent by utilizing some of my large shapes here, and while I'm out on the street, I'll wait for a bus or something else to kind of balance out. I'll think about how much large shapes are over here and how much weight I have on the right side. I need to balance it out. You see how there's not much going on right over here, and there's a lot of weight on this side? So I can wait for a bus that's a larger mass, and I really like buses, so it actually is a great it's a great balancer in your paintings, I guess you could say. So I will there will be another photo. Once I get to the bus section, I have another photo that I have the bus located about right here. But it's a nice balance. But we're going to get into a little black and white color study too after we talk about the color study that I did from life, to kind of really solidify my abstract, which is going to be the foundation of my painting. And that will actually make things go a lot smoother. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you my color study that I did from life and talk a little bit about that. Okay, here's my little color study that I have here. And so what I was trying to get, I mean, it was kind of a rainy day out there. So, I mean, whenever you're painting out in the city, I mean, you have the elements, you have everyday life going on. So you have to really calm yourself whenever you're out there trying to compose your scene, because there's a lot of stuff happening. And so I was trying to, what we were talking about in the photo, I was trying to balance out this large mass with this other small mass here, and trying to create a lot of atmosphere back here. So once we get into our little study and our large painting, we'll talk about pushing my values and pushing my temperatures to create more of a mood and feeling of your scene. And so, but the one thing I want to stress is that we have to really, really love the abstract part of our painting, because that is the foundation of everything, I feel. But we're going to be also talking about the little details that you can put into your work to actually bring more attention and more emphasis on your concept. So this particular study, I didn't put a lot of detail in it because I wanted to leave some outs for discovery in the large piece. So this gives me my overall feeling of how I want my large piece to feel, but I'm going to take my larger painting a little bit farther than what you see here in the study. So this is actually just for inspiration and color notes, so I can actually judge my temperatures a little bit more accurately, because in the photo you lose a lot of things with temperature in the photo. So these types of little areas right in here, like with the warmth underneath the eave, this value could actually be pushed a little bit darker to create more of an overhang. There's a number of different places that will actually help me in deciding the temperature differences and the value differences as well. And when we get into our black and white study, that will actually even solidify the value the value questions that I may have in my mind from my painting here even more. It'll help me to get to the next step. These are great to have, I mean, the photo and the life study to use together to work on your larger painting. So what I'm going to do now is just, I need to get into the small little study just so I can actually start figuring out these value problems that I may have, because I may change some things right in here to where I might push the value a little bit more, create more atmosphere in the background, kind of push that background back, and strengthen up some of the darks right in here to pull the foreground more forward. So, so let's get into the black and white painting and go from there. Now we're going to do our little black and white study. And so what I want to do on my palette is I want to mix up some starter values. So I'm just going to mix up some 5 values here together, and kind of spread them out in an arc right in this area right here. And that just actually gets me going. But I'm going to, obviously, it's a full range of values, so I'm going to mix in between there, but that just helps things to kick off. So, but before I get started, I want to explain these things to you. So I started off by using these plastic gloves that are made for mechanics. And I had some problems there for a little while whenever I was wiping my brush off, or the turpentine was creating a rash on my fingers here. And I started noticing that, and it wasn't going away. So I started seeing my friends that would have the plastic gloves on, and I started trying one on the hand that I wiped the brush with, and then I just kind of adopted the other one, because I play in the paint a lot, so I want to make sure that I'm not kind of polluting my body, any more than I have to. So that's the reason why I have these gloves, and I got used to them too, because I'm very tactile. But now I can actually sense and feel the paint with my hands, and feel the canvas and everything else in my gloves and brushes, and so it doesn't bother me anymore. But it took some getting used to. But I just feel like it's healthier. So, okay. So now we're going to get to I'm going to mix up real quick here some like five values. So start off by putting a pile here, a pile of black over here, mix it in 50-50, get that out of there. And whenever you're doing your color charts or value charts or anything else, I'm constantly looking at the separation of value over the top to find the true 50%. But these are just starters. We're not, not doing color charts right now, but but just kind of just gets me going. I'm not too worried about it. I just want to have to keep mixing up my paint all the time. Okay, just kind of smear that over here. And I'm going to, actually, for this value study, I'm going to keep that black in reserve. So I don't want to go too black with my values here. So I just want to slightly raise that value of the black. Because I don't, with the values, I don't want my shadows to go too dark. I got to be careful about that. I don't want to lose the air in the shadows. So with this little black and white study, it will help me kind of gauge that and create the atmosphere that I'm looking for. And in my painting, there's probably not going to be anything in it that's going to be right out of the tube white. So I want to keep that in reserve also. And what we're going to be talking about when we get cranked up here is the keying of the painting. And what we're going to have to do, if you remember looking at the little study, we have to key it off the light of the bus headlights. So that will help us key all the rest of the values down enough to where the headlights look like they're bright, but the sky doesn't overpower value-wise to throw it out of range. So we'll talk about that. But this actually is fine for now for me to get cranked up with the painting. I'm gonna use some homemade brushes I like here to get going. So I'm looking at my the photo of my scene and also my little color study too. And so first thing what I want to do is, like, whenever I'm starting any kind of city scene, I want to kind of establish my my eye level. Here, it kind of gives me a gauge. That's one of the first things I do is I put in my eye level whenever I'm working on a city scene here. Kind of gives me a gauge because it's a big difference. I mean, if you put your eye level here, it's going to change the whole feeling of the scene. So establishing this first actually gives me a good area to start to get the feeling of the scene. So now in my little study, I can see that, you know, obviously I'm looking at how I'm dividing space. With that grouping of light poles and the building together, I got to make sure that I don't divide this thing right in half. Watch your distance between here and here. I'm constantly judging that as I'm working through my paintings. And so dividing it this direction here is much better. I have a lot more space here than I do here. And as I'm composing it on site, I'm thinking about those things too. I'm looking through a viewfinder, and in the same proportion, the viewfinder is in the same proportion as the board that I'm working on. So just make sure that it's not, you know, a different proportion. So that's what I'm designing on site to make sure I get my shapes in good relationship to everything else, so nothing's actually being divided in half. So I want to kind of sketch out here, and remember, this is the eye level. I'm putting a general placement of shapes. that bus is going to be over here, but now look across from where the eye level is, and the eye level for me, because it was slightly going uphill from where I was standing, it's right at the base of that sandwich sign. So I'm looking across in my study to find out where I referenced the bus as it was going by on the street. It's a little bit higher. So place this here, and this is, I'm still thinking abstract. Try not to think about that's a bus or that's a car or whatever. Think just abstract shapes. We can always come back and adjust. So now we're going to talk about perspective in a second here too, but at this point in time, we're going to be just thinking about the abstractions. So let's see, we got this right here. Okay, I'm just trying to feel the weight of the painting. Adding just a touch of terp. I'm not, or Gamsol. Just adding a touch of that, just to kind of give it some fluidity. And I'm going to take the whole thing, because I'm going to draw over the top of this to kind of give some placement. Because I need to start getting in my extremes here, we're going to talk about, too, to kind of give it a gauge. That's going to be a little bit too dark. Okay, so now what we talked about, remember, like I mentioned something about the lights of the bus, and looking at my study, you know, this is an approximate placement of where that bus is going to be. I need to place a pretty light value, and in the color version, it's going to be a lot warmer. So I'm not worried about that at this point in time. So I'll probably just slightly tint the white just a little bit and place that in. And it's an enormous headlight, but that's just a placement to kind of give me a range. And so now I'm going to put in my darkest dark. So now I'm worried about my lightest light, my darkest dark. Those are the easiest things I can get on my canvas accurate at this point in time. Relatively accurate. I mean, it's the closest I can get. It's much harder to judge the middle values of your scene than it is to get your extremes in. So now I kind of put some boundaries up to kind of find out where everything else is going to be either below this darkest dark, lighter value than this darkest dark, or darker than that lightest light. So I'll be within that range. And we'll talk about our extremes in color as well, and temperature. So, but now this is what I'm worried about. Right now, I just want to stay in between these boundary lines. So now, having that placed, now I can start scumbling in more of the larger shapes. And all the while, I want you to constantly keep thinking about large masses, large abstractions. It's like, I feel like some of the best painters are the ones who love the abstract. And it's not about rushing to the realism, because all that will happen on its own. So, okay, so now we have our darkest dark and our lightest light, right? So now I want to get another large mass in here, and I can actually see that this is probably going to need to go a little bit lighter than what this is. But in order for me to do that, I can't really gauge until I get this mass, the mass of the sky in here, along with this mass in here. And so I need to get that background going too. And on my palette, you can see this is what I used for my, remember, this is what I used for the light of the headlight of the bus, right? So now I don't want to put my sky too close to that, because in the study you'll see that the sky goes down like 2 or 3 values. So we have to be careful not to get too close to this value here of the headlights, because if we do that, we're going to kill our mood, and the headlight is not going to look like it's bright enough. So we have to step down quite a few notches for the sky. So, which leaves this range for us to deal with the darker masses of the buildings in order to separate. So pay close attention to what you're mixing on the palette. Look at how this relates to here, and how this relates to the darker masses in here. And kind of plan it in your mind's eye, and then test it on the canvas to kind of see how it's going to work. I think that's going to be pretty close, because then looking through right through here to here and down to the darkest dark, looking at my photo and then looking at my little study, I can see we're in a pretty close range. I could even push it down a little bit farther if I wanted to make it even a little bit moodier. So let's see. Maybe a little bit more. I'm grabbing just a touch of liquid as I'm doing this, just to give it a little bit more fluidity. And I like it in the early stage, using the liquid sometimes in the early stages, because it starts to set up later on a little quicker. And I like it when it starts getting tacky. And in city scenes and figures, portraits, whatever you're painting, you know, I'm constantly judging from my extremes, my lightest light, darkest dark, strongest color, one of my sharpest edges. I'm constantly comparing to those. But I'm also keeping in mind too, it is relative accuracy. So I want to pay close attention to how I feel about the scene. How do I feel about the tones, then the values? I want it to be relatively accurate and feel like I want the painting to feel like I do from life. And if we're overly literal about things, then it will be boring, and it won't get that feeling that you got from life. So you may have to push your values a little darker sometimes. You may have to bring them up a little lighter sometimes. So it just really depends. But just concentrate on how you feel about the scene, and how you can manipulate your painting to actually bring more strength to it. So, and the more I paint, the more I try to listen to that part. And granted, this is going to be a pretty loose interpretation, so I don't want to get too detailed with this. See, I'm pushing these masses back. See, I'm just thinking mass. You know, see, there's a lot of buildings and stuff back in there. If I go in too deep into my mind in the background, I'll start putting in porches and everything else. So I just want to keep it as a large mass and keep the abstraction strong. So I'm looking at the sky relationships here, pushing the atmosphere back. I love moody, atmospheric days. Rainy or snowy or whatever it may be. Because I really love grays. So, okay, now before I get too far, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. So I need to start getting into this ground plane, and I'll be getting back into this larger mass also. But just constantly think about balance too as you're painting. How is the painting balancing out? How does it feel to you? I just need to place that what do you call that thing? One of those traffic lights. That's what it is. I want to place the traffic light right up in here, and just to kind of give me a better idea of what I'm doing. And I really like feeling my way into a painting, because it definitely leaves things open to discovery. And I'm a huge experimenter, and I like to actually discover things along the way. Makes it a heck of a lot more fun to me. Let me get, and what I do a lot of on site is I look in my mirror upside down. Like I'll place my mirror, and I have a really ratty one that I just keep for nostalgic reasons, and even though it's broken, but I'll look at the scene upside down to kind of get a fresh eye, and then I'm looking at it from life. I do this with figures and portraits also, so this gives me a good fresh interpretation of what I'm looking at. And sometimes the lightest lights and the darkest darks and the strongest colors really pop out whenever I'm doing that. So I do that a lot, and I also look at my painting in reverse also, and try to get as fresh eye as I can, because the longer you stare at your painting, it's harder to see what you're really going for. So I have to constantly keep stepping away from that. So now, let's see. So here, the ground plane, so this is a larger mass, right? So I don't want to worry about all those cars. I can start introducing some of those cars in later on, but I'm just thinking about my main masses, the main cars here in the foreground. And so now, looking at the relationship between the ground plane and the sky, it was a wet day that day, and in the photo it doesn't really pick up on that. It was a lot more reflective whenever I was painting earlier. So, but you don't want the ground to be so reflective to where it actually looks exactly the same value as the sky. So that's going to really distort things. It'll make it just won't look like it's on the right plane. So we have a little situation here in the background that we're going to discuss once we get into the larger painting, once I start talking a little bit about perspective here. But you'll see in the photo the streak kind of rises up a little bit, kind of rises probably just a touch higher than the eye level. And I like stuff like that, but it's actually harder to explain because you have to make sure you have the right temperature changes to where it looks like the ground is actually inclining. But there's not many cities in the world where everything is 100% flat. So just keep that. I like to actually have that kind of variety. So I got to get into that mass. See, these values are a little bit too close. I don't like that. So I need to fix it. Make that a little bit darker back in here towards the ground. I should really be doing a lot more of these black and white studies because, even if you do a ton of them, you don't do enough of it. So, okay. Okay. I'm going to deepen some of these values back in here. Still, all the while I'm back in this background area, I'm constantly keep looking back up and to the front and relating back this area all the time. I don't want to swim back in there with my mind too much. Otherwise, I might make my values too dark. Too dark or a little bit too dark, because I still want to keep that atmosphere. And so there's a big old sign thing back in the back that I like a lot. I like a lot of these little abstract elements in a city scene that kind of, even in this abstract stage, the shape itself is recognizable because we've seen it a number of different times. So in the simplest way, it seems like a part of a city. So I look for things like that in a scene that I could still keep very abstract, but you don't have to put that much work into it, and it still feels like it's a little part of a city scene. So, and I want to make sure I keep this study just very abstract, and I don't want to put too much detail in it, but I just want to get it to the point where it helps me figure out my next steps when I start working with my larger painting. Okay, see this value? I want to keep this value lighter behind. See that traffic light, and it may be a little bit lighter because of the glare. But I want to keep in mind too, whenever you have a dark mass like that traffic light that's surrounded by a lot of light, you got to make sure that you don't mix too dark of a color, because there's a lot of ambient light that's wrapping around that smaller value, and that value is going to be a little bit lighter than what you think. But if you're staring at one of those lights and it's surrounded by the light of the sky, in relationship, it'll look darker than it really is, just by relationship. So you got to keep that in mind too. So, and actually, as I'm looking at this, it'll probably go just a touch darker. Keep referring back to here. Don't get too crazy and make this too dark. I want to make sure I don't do that. I have to keep checking myself all the time. So now, and see the buildings that are behind this area, behind that traffic light, I want to push them back a little bit more so that traffic light comes ahead of those buildings. And I'm going to keep the edges pretty soft too. So, see that building that's coming up behind here in the study. Got a little bit darker. Make sure I don't exhaust my values. I still want to keep the darkness of the bus's window. I don't want the darkness of that bus's window to be back here too. So and another thing I want to touch on too is I have a huge aversion to tangent lines, and tangent lines meaning that if one of the buildings line up, like say that building lines up with the front part of the bus or whatever, it will create a tangent line that will force the background object to come too far forward, and just because it's in alignment with what's going on in the background, it will bring everything, it'll flatten everything out. And we don't want to do that, so we want to make sure that we watch out for any kind of vertical tangent lines and horizontal tangent lines too, to where it could be a visual tangent line where something over here that's coming horizontally here, if this roof line lined up with the top of the building right here too much, and I think I did that in my study, and that's going to annoy me. So I have to make sure that I watch out for that also. So I want to do everything in my power to make sure that there's nothing that's going to distract from my concept, from my original idea about the scene. And those are distractors. And when people are viewing your paintings, they may not even realize why they're being distracted. But those tangent lines can actually really screw up the feeling of your piece. So I'm going to try to avoid that. So okay, see there's a lighter value on top of that bus too. And watch this area here. I'm trying to watch this area to make sure I don't screw this up. In my study, I feel that it's too close. So you have to factor in like a 1/4 inch, like if your frame is coming in, a 1/4 inch right here for the rabbit. So it's going to leave, when the frame is on, it's going to leave about this much space. And if it's a little bit too close, you might want to cheat it over just a little bit more. Because you still want to maintain balance right here. And also, once we get into the large painting, I'll talk about the perspective issue too, to where you still want to maintain the correct perspective if you're cheating something over, to make it look like, you don't want the bust to look like it's coming the wrong direction in the wrong lane. But this little street right here, for this format, I'm cheating in the street a little bit more anyway. But we still want to make it make sense, like there's still enough room for another car to go down that street on the other side. So. Let's see. Okay, see that the light value of the what do you call that? The light of the bus. I don't want that value of the white of the top of the bus that's reflecting the sky too. I don't want that to get brighter than this. In keying these types of paintings, you have to be extremely disciplined with comparing. So these headlights always look like they're on. And if you lose your extreme, you got to go back and get it. Put that in there too. And I'm going to drag it down into the street pretty soon here, but remember I cheated over that bus, so I have to cheat over some of the placements of things. It's a little bit darker value as the bus goes back with those windows that are on the side of the bus. With that white value is a touch darker also, but it still needs to have a separation. And also, what I need to watch out for too is watch these distances. As something goes back in the distance, say this bus, it's a rectangle shape. Watch the back to the front corner. Pay close attention to that distance. In our mind, a lot of times, we'll actually want to, we force our vision to come over here sometimes if we're not paying close attention to it. And we'll make it too long. The bus may be coming back way back here, and it'll look like this bus is about 200 feet long. We don't want to do that, so we're going to make close observations to this distance. Hi, my name's Scott Powers. Thanks for being here with me today. We're going to be doing a demonstration of a city scene, and it's one of my most favorite subjects. And living in a city like Chicago, there's tons of subject matter for me. And I've been living there probably about 15 years now, and I went to school in Chicago also. I went to the American Academy of Art for about 4 years, and that was a life-changing event for me. It was a fantastic school. But I also spent a lot of time at the Palette and Chisel. I would go there after school almost every day for 4 years and took workshops and did open studios and everything else. But what I want to talk to you about today is about painting a city scene. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you, I'm going to start off by showing you a color study and the photo inspiration. And the color study that I did it from life. I did it out on the street. And it was a little bit rainy day. And I love painting gray rainy days, so some of my favorites. Then after that, we're going to get into a black and white study. And the black and white study helps me solidify my design and strengthen my idea in my head, and kind of, solidifies a lot of things for me. So I'm going to show you that process also, and then we're going to go into the large painting after that. Okay, now I want to show you the photo that was my inspiration. Actually, the scene was my inspiration, but I want to show you the photo that I took while I was on location. Show you here, we got a great large flat screen that we're using to display the photo. And what we're going to be doing here is this little corner scene of this sandwich shop in Chicago. And this is down the street from my studio, actually, about less than a mile up the street. But what I want to get across here is how to really simplify your city scene, because there's a lot of chaotic stuff going on in the city, so we need to really simplify. Here's my little color study that I have here, and so what I was trying to get, I mean, it was kind of a rainy day out there, so I mean, whenever you're painting out in the city, I mean, you have the elements, you have everyday life going on, so you have to really calm yourself whenever you're out there trying to compose your scene, because there's a lot of stuff happening. And so I was trying to, what we were talking about in the photo, I was trying to balance out this large mass with this other small mass here, and trying to create a lot of atmosphere back here. So once we get into our little study and our large painting, we'll talk about pushing my values and pushing my temperatures to create more of a mood and feeling of your scene. We're going to get to I'm going to mix up real quick here some like five values. So I'm looking at my the photo of my scene and also my little color study too. And so first thing what I want to do is, like, whenever I'm starting any kind of city scene, I want to kind of establish my eye level. Here, it kind of gives me a gauge. That's one of the first things I do, is I put in my eye level. I think I'm gonna leave it like this for now, and then we're gonna get into the large painting, and then I'll show you how I bring them all together. All right, so now we just got finished with the study. So what I want to talk about now is that we have our color study here, we have the black and white, and I wanted to keep this very simple and very abstract. And remember, I'm going to really push these reflections in here too, so you need to be aware of that. Now let me just get her white jacket on there for now. In my little study, I'm actually going to make her with a longer white coat. I just think it'll feel better for some reason. I don't know, but I just want to give her a longer white coat. I just think that'll just suit it better. And I'm looking at my extreme again, my lightest light. I'm going to make sure I don't get anywhere close to this. Stay away from that. Cool it off. Even add some of that sky color into it, just a touch. Even though it may have some pink colors into it, what it's surrounded by will make it look white, because there's so much other pink tones around here. So, okay, I'm gonna gotta continue getting in. Okay, see now here, now remember we talked about in the early stage about in our drawing about looking vertically and horizontally every time we're laying in a vertical stroke or horizontal stroke. Look what's happening right here. It's creating a visual tangent right here, so that's bad news. So I'm going to change that. So I've gotten in the habit of looking up and down and side to side whenever I'm drawing. So I'm going to move that side of that, I'm going to move that shadow of that building right there over, so it doesn't line up with that bus. That'd be no good, and it would just flatten things out visually. I'm going to go back up into this sign real quick before I forget. Okay, because that sign says it's a Chrysler Jeep signs. So what I can do is I can actually make my own by saying, like, putting like half the word of Jeep in here and say Chrysler right up here, but just have it very subtle to where you can't really tell what it says, but you can tell it says something. Whenever I go out into the city scene, you know, I want to first do my on-site study, my little 8x10 or whatever it may be, so I can get all my information I possibly can in there, and really search for your temperature changes, the temperature changes that your photo is not going to pick up on. And then when you get back into your studio, you're going to want to do your black and white study, and that's very, very helpful, and using your color study and your photo to help you along the way to kind of make it even stronger. But one thing, just never lose sight of your concept. Your concept is everything. So really think a lot about what's going on, the stories. There's a million stories in a city scene, and find one that you can attach yourself to.
Well, that was called City Scenes from the great painter Scott Tallman Powers, and you can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Remember, there's a special discount code in the comments section. Thanks for watching.